Soon-to-be 58-year-old Mike Tyson does not have to have any brain scan done to be allowed to box in the state of Texas. And to me, that's just the tip of what is wrong with the fact that this fight is still happening. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and my goal in this channel is to help teach you about the medical side of the sports world. In this video, we're going to talk about the medical side of this ulcer flare-up, but more importantly, why there might have been a specific reason the fight is taking place in Texas as opposed to other states based on the restrictions and detail of the medical clearance process. First off with this, the wording about recent ulcer flare-up is concerning because that suggests that he's already dealing with an ulcer in his stomach and it flared up so significantly to the point that he was unable to continue training for at least a few weeks. Now, think of an ulcer as potentially some bleeding or extensive irritation on the lining of the stomach. In the best case scenario, this is just a little bit of heartburn. And on the worst case scenario, this is something that can cause massive blood loss in the stomach and even potentially death. Looking at our biodigital anatomy tool here, let's talk about the just anatomy of where these ulcers occur. So our GI system, we're going to first have the esophagus. That's the pipe that our food travels down to get into the stomach. To digest the food that we eat, our stomach is acidic. So the cells inside our stomach produce stomach acid, and that stomach acid helps to digest the food that we eat. But it's acidic, and so that stomach acid can be harmful and cause irritation and damage to the actual cells that line the inside of the stomach, because these are living cells that line the inside of the gut, the inside of the intestines. They're active, they're helping with food absorption in the gut with acid production. And so if you get damage to those cells can cause bleeding, and then you can have severe complications. So somebody who has a little bit of acid reflux, that's where some of that stomach acid can kind of migrate its way up the esophagus, cause some burning, some chest discomfort. When it becomes more severe, you can actually get ulceration or bleeding in the lining of the stomach that, if bad enough, can cause significant blood loss, and if you lose enough blood, can actually cause death. A duodenal ulcer occurs more at the duodenum, which is where the stomach leads into the small intestine, whereas a peptic ulcer is going to be higher up at the main sort of body and component of the stomach itself. So essentially, we're finding out that Tyson has some type of bleeding ulceration in his stomach that, if made worse, and in the worst case scenario, could lead to massive blood loss and could potentially be fatal. So nothing that you can take lightly, and a very real serious significant thing. Next, we're going to dive into the complex world of medical clearance and why there could be legitimate reason this fight was chosen to be in Texas. But first, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video. Today's video is sponsored by Huel. I am constantly busy and on the go, whether it's running my clinic all day long or being on the road traveling with sports coverage for work. I don't always have time to pack lunch and end up spending way too much money on unhealthy fast food. Well, today's sponsor, Huel, is here to help. Huel is no prep meals that don't compromise on your health. Huel is ideal for when you're on the go, pressured for time, in a rush, or just away from the kitchen. All you need is some cold water and you have a convenient and nourishing meal in just seconds. I particularly love Huel's Black Edition, which is their low carbohydrate, high protein powdered meal. It has 40 grams of protein plus 27 essential vitamins and minerals. It's plant-based, gluten-free, and has no artificial sweeteners. Right now, if you want to save money, save time, and eat healthy, use code BRIANMD for 15% off your first Huel order. Plus, you're going to get a free t-shirt and a free shaker cup valued at $40. That's code BRIANMD for 15% off. Link is in the description. I love it on the go at work. It's perfect for that busy time between patients. It mixes well, tastes delicious, and my favorite flavor in particular is the chocolate. It's got a nice rich chocolate flavor, it's not gritty, and it just goes down really easy and tastes great. Having a busy life shouldn't stop you from eating healthy, so check out Huel today. Thank you again to Huel for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to our learning. The most important thing to understand here is not every single state has the same medical requirements to allow an athlete to compete in a combat sport. So depending on the state that you're trying to get licensed in to compete, there is going to be a different, less rigorous, more rigorous set of medical clearance depending on that particular state's athletic commission. For example, we look here at the State of Nevada Athletic Commission, professional contestant. This is what is required. There's this application portal, the fee, and then this physical exam report where they talk about some laboratory testings, right? HIV, hepatitis, you don't want to be transmitting those. You also have to have a dilated eye exam specifically by an ophthalmologist, not just an optometrist. And then importantly, in the case of the state of Nevada, an actual MRI of the brain without contrast and an MRA looking at the blood flow and the circulation within the brain. Has to have been done every 5 years. And interestingly, if you dive into the link for that MRI of the brain, they even give more detail that specify what they're going to be looking at. So they're going to be looking at these signs of traumatic brain injury. If there's atrophy, if there's any sort of dilation of the ventricles, increased size of the ventricles, evidence of contusion, shearing injury, all very legitimate things that can be a sign of structural damage in your brain that you want to know about if you're trying to fight and be cleared. If we look at the actual medical clearance form, this details what needs to be done for their history, their physical exam. But crazily, if you look at the state of Nevada and the physical exam, the only neurologic part of the physical exam is looking at the pupil reflexes, the knee reflex, a Romberg, which is a balance, a very, very basic balance assessment, and something called the Babinski, which is a test of an upper motor neuron or a spinal cord / potential brain lesion. But there's no actual formal neurologic exam that's required to compete in combat sports in the state of Nevada. You need an MRI, which is great. I think that's very important, but you don't actually need to do an in-depth, extensive neurology exam for the state of Nevada. So we're kind of 50-50 here. We've got a brain MRI, but we don't have any specific mention about an exam from a neurologist. Now, if we contrast that with the state of California, this is the form from the state of California in terms of what's required for medical clearance. A physical, valid for 12 months. Eye exam, again, done by an ophthalmologist, a specific eye surgeon, valid for 12 months. Neuro, so the state of California requires that you've actually been evaluated by a neurologist or a neurosurgeon for an in-depth nerve brain exam from a physical standpoint. Also, MRI, done by neurologist, neurosurgeon. There's a summary form. That one's valid for 3 years. So the state of California requires both an MRI and requires a neuro exam. In my opinion, very thorough, a very excellent, well-rounded assessment of a fighter's health from a neurologic perspective. Now, of course, let's go look at the state of Texas, where this fight is taking place. So if we scroll down here and we look at the licensing forms, this is going to be the physical and eye exam form to compete as a combat sport athlete in the state of Texas. Now, here you have to do an ophthalmology exam, which again, part of an evaluation for the eyes. That's great. But there is nothing in here about needing brain imaging. So no requirements to have a brain MRI, a brain MRA, looking at the blood flow in the brain. I will say they have at least a little bit better of a neurology exam. So here they're going to ask you to test the cranial nerves grossly, which are the nerves kind of controlling the head, gait, some balance again with Romberg, finger to nose. That's a test for coordination, but a very simple neurologic exam that can be done by a non-neurologist. And then again, nothing in here about requiring any sort of brain MRI or brain imaging to look for signs of structural damage from repetitive brain injury. The one additional thing that the state of Texas will do if you're considered an older fighter is they'll require an EEG, an electroencephalography, and an EKG, an electrocardiogram, if you're older than 36. So the State of Texas Athletic Commission considers 36 to be an older age where you have to have additional testing done. Tyson is going to be 22 years older than this. And so it's just crazy that, again, there's not some other threshold of fighter clearance given that level of age. And an EEG is not going to give you any good, strong sense of structural brain trauma from repetitive blows, from aging. And so this is a little bit of, in my opinion, kind of a false sense of security. The EKG, that's nice to see because that's going to look at his electrical activity of his heart, see if there's any evidence of like heart strain, heart, blockages, things like that, that would be important to know, again, in a 58-year-old. But per Texas, 36, that's the age at which you're considered, older, to where you have to have some additional testing performed. So we've got 3 very different states where boxing and MMA takes place. California requires a neurologist to see you and a brain scan. Nevada, a brain scan, but no neurology exam. And then Texas, where you don't need a brain scan at all, and you need at least a basic neurology exam. So I don't know all of the reasons why the fight's taking place in Texas. I'm sure some of it is stadium availability, but you always wonder how much of it might be because of the individual athletic commission within that state and what has to be done to allow a fighter to safely compete. Theoretically, Mike Tyson does not need to have any brain imaging to be licensed to box in the state of Texas. And to me, that is flat out ridiculous. So just for a 58-year-old to be licensed to box, period, to me, it feels completely unsafe and dangerous. But now you're going to add in that you're not even required to do any sort of brain imaging to look and see structurally what that boxer's brain looks like, especially someone like Tyson, who's had a very long career with a lot of fights. It feels just very unsafe. Now, people will ask them, well, what age is too old to box? If Tyson was 50, would that be okay? If he was 45, what if he was 65? There's no clear age cutoff where they're going to say you can't compete. Now, I think in the International Boxing Association, the IBA, I think you technically have to be below the age of 40. So that is at least some rough guidance. The Association of Boxing Commissions and Combative Sports actually has some really great info. They list all the different state requirements if you want to go look through it yourself. But there's also this thing called the Boxing Severity Index, which was developed to try and get some rough sense of the risk of having a significant brain injury with boxing. And it looks at things like your activity, your recent record, if you're on a downswing or up, how many knockouts you've had. And it also looks at the age. And look at this. For them, the two age cutoffs are 35 and 44. So at 44, that is what they felt was the highest age that needed to be listed to consider it being higher risk. Tyson is 14 years older than this by the time he competes. So even per this, the actual medical folks that are trying to make these general guidelines, he is so far out of that upper limit of the expected range that it just doesn't even have a number on the scale. Aside from all these numbers, the MRIs, the neurology exams, just think about the risk of putting somebody in there at that age. It is a very proven fact that as you get older, your reflex time decreases. And that's not because you're not training, it's because your brain, your nerves structurally change in a way that you have diminished reflexes. And so to fight somebody who's also 58, their reflexes are going to be low too. They're not going to have as much power. Maybe it's a little bit more fair. But to be fighting somebody like Jake Paul, who's probably, 30 years younger than Tyson with very good normal reflexes, it's just absolutely crazy in my mind to think that it's okay to allow Tyson to be out there with impaired reaction time at an older age, with all of this history, to go and take a punch from Jake Paul. At a minimum, I hope that Tyson's team is doing brain imaging. I hope they're sending him to a neurologist to at least make sure that they don't identify anything that would objectively say it's not a good idea. These state commissions need to have some exception where if there's an extenuating circumstance, like a fighter who's 58 competing against somebody who's in their 20s, there have to be additional tests that are done. And maybe there are, and I hope we find out. If we are, fantastic. I hope we find that out. I hope we can at least feel a little bit better objectively about Tyson. But I just think it's absurd, and I can't believe that the fight is still going on. I don't think we're ever going to see a strict age cutoff for boxing. Now, obviously, everybody would agree that an 80-year-old is not safe to go up against a 20-year-old, but teasing out the exact line has to be on an individual basis. But I do think that the requirements need to be stricter. There needs to be a requirement for brain imaging. There needs to be a requirement to be seen by a neurologist who doesn't have any boxing affiliation, who doesn't have any bias in this, and can just tell Tyson the honest, flat-out risk and danger of what he is doing. That's it for the video, everybody. Let me know, as always, any questions or comments down below. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.